So I am Chandler Prazak. I'm one of the men's directors here in 1112. This is Jake Lambrisi. He is our worship pastor. And this is Natalie Lambrisi. She does... Yeah. No, we get it. Yeah, she's better than us. She is the 11th grade girls director, as well as everything. Like, if you're like, hey, this room feels really comfortable, that's because of Nat and all that she's done in here, as well as like all the community nights and stuff, all the ambience of that. She is great with that. Today, Jake and Nat are going to be imparting just a little bit of their wisdom that they've had throughout marriage to us, because they have a great and healthy marriage, and they're an example that I look up to, and I know a lot of other couples look up to as just someone that they can go to as a resource and talk to. And so whether it be sex, marriage, dating, just any part of this kind of series that we're talking about, Jake and Nat are going to answer some questions for us. And so the first one is, how long have you guys been married? Oh, actually, you can go ahead and throw my number up on the screen. If you guys have a question, you can text that to my number, and I will.
Is that your personal number?
Yeah, it is. So
nice.
I didn't know like the little app thing. So like if anyone wants to hang out and you're a guy, like let's hang out. Girls, don't text me. I have a fiance and I'm not interested. So that's right.
We've been married for 9 years, almost. In May. In May, we'll have been married 9 years.
That's crazy. What year? How old were you when you got married?
20.
Did a bunch of people tell you that was too young?
No, I think they were probably thinking it. No one really. I don't think anyone said it to our face. But yeah, there was probably people thinking it.
But you're happily married, so they were wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah, how did you guys meet?
What?
How'd you guys meet?
So we grew up at North Coast Church, so we both met at Whitewater. There was like swimming around in some pool, and people were climbing up on rocks on the side of the river, and there was like girls struggling on the rocks, and Jake was standing there helping girls up and shaking their hand and saying, "Hi, I'm Jake Lambrisi." And so that's where I met him, and I had a crush on him ever since, and he doesn't remember any of it.
I don't actually have a mental like image of when we met. I just feel like because we've both been around North Coast for so long, so like I've seen her around probably like my whole life, so I don't have a exact moment of when we met, but she says that was it.
What was your guys' first date?
I tricked her into our first date. It was awesome.
That's the way to do it.
Yeah, so I told her, I was like, hey, like a group of us are going beach cruising by the beach, and they weren't. And then when she got there, I was like, no one showed up.
Nat, were you like excited that no one else showed up, or were you just like, what's going on? What was?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot more context to that. We'd been hanging out like every day for at least a year and a half before that. Yeah, really.
Every day?
It's all fuzzy. It's been
No,
so long.
We
It's
were
been 10
on
years.
staff with a high school ministry then, and there was another intern that was his cousin. So the three of us would hang out all the time. A lot of us would just hang out after ministry stuff a ton. So that was pretty normal. And so I was really comfortable with him. I wasn't like, oh my gosh, this is the first time I've ever spoken to him. But we had a lot in common already. And I remember driving there. I think he texted me that no one was going to be there, or maybe no one was going to be there. And I got like 2 blocks away, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is weird. But all of it was really comfortable
It worked.
after that.
Married now, right?
Yep.
It seems like being on staff with someone is really the way to go. It just works. Okay, so some of the questions we have. One of the first ones is, how did you guys know that you were ready to get married? Because that's like the question is, people always say, are you ready to get married? How do you know? How did you know you were ready?
Well, yeah, we weren't ready at all. There was like, I think we were making like total $900 a month when we got engaged and were married. It was pretty like, I can't believe no one said anything to us. It was like we got laughed at when we went to go like look for a place to live by the guy when he asked how much we made, and so but like, so financially and stuff we weren't I don't even know how we got to a place that we were by the time we got married. It just worked out. Yeah, we just had to. But for us, like there was never gonna be a perfect time for us to get married. And when we started dating, like we hadn't dated in high school other people. And so there was always the intention, okay, the person that I marry that I date is someone I could see myself marrying. And so we both knew that going in. And just kind of pretty soon into it, we both just kind of realized, okay, well, let's let's get married or break up. Because, like, this is either going somewhere or it's not. And, you know, for her, like, for me, her interest and what she liked to do is, like, everything that I like to do. So we're really compatible, and we both love Jesus, and we just fell in love with each other, and that was just it. It's like, okay, well, if we're going to invest in this, let's do it, and if not, let's break up.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a perfect time. You know, I'm sure, like, getting as much understanding before we got married of what that looked like was helpful, but yeah, we probably weren't ready, but I don't know that anyone is.
For sure. I hear that statement a lot. No one's really ready. And sometimes I think, I know personally for me, like in this season, it's almost insulting. And I know that what they mean is like, oh, you're never ready. But like, what does that mean? Like, because I know you guys have grown up in the church. So I'm sure you've heard a lot of marriage seminars. Like, what is the breakdown between what you can learn in a setting versus when you actually get there? Like, what's the difference there?
Well, there's so much stuff that I wish that we would have known before we got married. Like, there's just things that we just tell people now that are about to get married that was just like, man, I wish someone would have told me this or helped us in this area.
Can you think of some of those?
Yeah, totally. Well, I'm thinking, can you think of any? Well, I'm thinking, can you think of any?
Oh, can I just say some?
Do you know one right now?
Right now.
Oh, to make that easier, what are some misconceptions, I guess, that
Yeah.
you had about marriage and sex just entirely that helped you guys?
Okay. Wait. Okay. I don't know if this is right on that, but like, I think when you get married, something that really you should have a good grasp on. We'll never fully have this because we're just humans and there's sin nature and there's so many lies that get spoken into our lives. But, you know, as a Christian, you should really know who you are in God. If you are secure in that and your identity is in that, that's just so big going into a relationship because then you're not going to rely on another person. Because if I'm relying on that to give me my self-worth, I'm not going to get it because, you know, she sins. And same thing, if she relies on me, she's not going to get it. And we realized that pretty early on. I would say that was an area where we actually probably could have been at a better place in our life, or someone could have just walked us through that better, but like before we got married. Because that was just something that when we got married, it was more evident to us. You know, it's like, oh man, we're like, you know, kind of leaning on each other in these areas where we should be leaning on God. And that still happens for us, but just someone never even just verbally said that to us before we got married, and it just made just areas harder. Sex being one of them, since this one's on sex.
What are some of I guess what role does like communication play in sex? Because I know we talk about communication is healthy for all relationships, but yeah, that's never really something that's talked about a whole lot, is like communication of sex. What are some, I guess...
Like during?
Yeah, during, afterwards, like to make your sex life better. What part does communication play in that?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you say communication and it sounds like just like the cookie cutter answer to how to make marriage better. But I think like really trusting the other person, like we probably just had to learn how to trust each other, that we weren't going to like end an awkward conversation and just continue on with this awkwardness, but we were really in it to resolve this and to understand each other better. And yeah, I think that's a big thing, is like any communication, it's not for the sake of being heard well, but it's to understand what the other person is trying to convey, because that's the biggest thing that you can't be educated on before you get married, of how, for girls, how men work, or for him to understand how women work. There's just so much that we are still figuring out between each other. And so you can't like read a book on the other person's brain and know what to do. It's just a lot of conversations of, why do you feel that way about that? How does that affect you in that way? And then if you're not so worked up about making sure you're heard or understood, then you're taking the time to listen to what they say and like being gracious in that, not making judgments on like, well, you're wrong because that makes me feel this way, but just wanting to understand each other and then wanting to serve and like guard each other in whatever those things are, or just, you know, it also just helps us love each other better, to know these things we enjoy more, these things we don't enjoy more, this is the reason behind it, and just get really comfortable with like good communication for the sake of understanding each other better.
What are 3 tips that you could give to people that are if people were about to get married, or in this setting, things that might not learn an appropriate 3 tips of how to make your sex life better in marriage, like things that once people are starting, because you kind of go into it blind, especially for a lot of people who've never had sex before. It's just, or even people who have had sex before, not knowing what to do in a marriage setting. What are 3 tips that you would give?
I think like sex is not it doesn't just start in the bedroom for us. Like, our sex is not good if that's like the only interaction we've had that day or that week. If we're, not like bonding together, or if I'm not putting in the work to like meet her love languages during the week. For Nat, it's quality time and physical touch. So I know like every day I need to be giving her hugs and kisses, and that's huge for her. She told me, and I still like, man, I don't always do it. But when I remember, like if I notice I haven't done it all day and I'm like on the other side of the house and she's in the kitchen, I just go across and I just like give her a hug and a kiss, because it's like when I remember like right away. And usually it's like when she's cooking and she's like, okay, get off. But yeah, like for us to just be enjoying each other, for me, I just, when we're joking around together, and that's something I even just have to remember, just, that I need to be having fun with her just throughout the week. And, that there's times where we be serious, but there's times where we're just enjoying each other, and we're goofing off and we're having fun and we're making each other laugh and enjoying that time. It just makes it makes sex just natural, and it just happens. It's not like, and you can tell when like you haven't had a good week, because, when that area is just forced then, and you just kind of feel like, well, we haven't really connected, so we should have sex, and, and it usually ends up in just a conversation of like, okay, well, we haven't been connecting.
Yeah. Were you saying things that they could work on now, or just tips for later? I got lost. Tips for later. Yeah, that was really good. I think even on the other side of that, like learning to understand, because it is like we're in like the constant state of like love making, of like it's moving towards that at all times in our marriage. So I think just understanding also how the other person gives love, because when I just like was in my paradigm where love is only physical touch and quality time, and I would be like, he doesn't love me this week. But why did he buy me, like, spend $200 on my birthday present? I would rather if we just spent time together. And so I felt unloved. And it just kind of, like, they piggyback off of each other, where you start to, like, resent the other person because they're not loving you the way that you want to be loved. And so I think for one, to love them better is to, know their love language and how you can serve that, but also just be aware of, like, okay, he's not totally forgetting about me. Like, I think I've grown a lot in that through the years of, like, I don't get suddenly insecure because you haven't given me a hug or a kiss, because I know that you're doing all the other things that are love and like in your world. So I can still like receive love through that.
What are some things that they can do now in order to protect their future sex life?
I think just understanding that the sexuality that you have right now is not necessarily just your own, and like that it someday is going to be joined with the person that you marry. So any choices that you're making personally with struggles that you have, or even choices that you make in relationships that you think like, oh, it's not a big deal, it only affects right now, it really doesn't. And so just having that understanding that, your selflessness right now, your obedience right now, the choices that you make, even small choices to not put yourself in compromising situations, those all play into that and lead up to, helping you to have that understanding when you do get married one day, that it's not just about you and how you can feel satisfied in your sex life with your spouse, but really enjoy it the way that it's meant to be, that you're serving each other, and that's the most fulfilling kind of sex that you can have.
Yeah, and it's all about just kicking bad habits now. Don't think about kicking habits when you get married. It's like, okay, well, when I get married, I'll stop looking at porn, or when I get married, I'll stop, fooling around with people. Or when I get married, I'll stop talking about the opposite sex the way that I do, because you can't just kick that stuff. By the time, if you do it enough, you're addicted to it. And like for me, I do not remember the last time I called another girl pretty, hot, anything like that. Just for me and Nat, just even the way that we talk about the opposite sex affects our sex life and affects our marriage. And so if you can get in the habit of just all that stuff and just really like talking about the opposite sex and like how it should be. And so for us, that's just huge. And I know that she doesn't talk about guys like that too. It's like really just like a boundary that we've set up, and we trust each other and have proven that we're not going to do that. Why would we give anyone else the attention that, we want to give to each other?
Yeah, and I can attest to that too, because when we were in Costa Rica a number of years ago, someone was like, we were all going to sleep at night, and someone was like, oh, this girl's cute. And Jake was like, you wonder who's hot? And everyone was just quiet. And he's like, Nat. And then we all just like looked at him and we're like, yeah? Like, what do we say? But yeah, Jake's always constantly just steered conversation towards letting everyone know how much he thinks of Nat and only Nat, as far as I've seen. So, fun question. Nikki Cook actually wants to know when your first kiss was.
Sure. Is this it? What is it? At Scott's house? Yeah. Is that it? Yeah, man. We did not have the boundary conversation as soon as we should have. It was on my cousin Scott's couch. We did? Whatever.
Our boundary was probably
that
unrealistic, and we said, let's just try not to kiss for as long as we can.
And it had been
and
a week,
was
and we made out on my cousin Scott's couch. So,
does Scott have a nice couch?
I don't know. I wasn't paying attention to the couch.
Jake,
Setting good boundaries and having people to surround you is a really good way to protect your sex life, because we did not have a good support system around us. Like, our friends were telling us that we probably weren't going to make it till we were married, and that it wasn't, and we did mess up, that it wasn't like, who cares, wasn't a big deal. There was no one building us up like in that area of our relationship. So make sure that you have that. It's just so important.
Jake, do you have time for one more? You got to go. Jake plays worship and live, so it depends. All right, it depends on what time it has. What are, for you, and I'll probably ask Nat the question once you're gone, but what's some of the hardest things that you've gone through in marriage? Just like personal things that you've had to overcome in your own life, or laying down selfishness? What are just some things that?
Yeah, that's a big one. I don't have time for that.
Deferred to Nat. Yeah, Jake plays worship and live, and so he does that. He's got to do a closer. He's not just leaving because he doesn't like us. Look at that. Good father over there. Yeah, Nat, for you, what are some difficulties that you've had in marriage? May it be yourself or either just learning to communicate? What are some of those things, and how did you overcome them?
Yeah, I think Jake's talked about it a little bit, but I know a big one for us was just like each of ours appetite for sex not quite measuring up to be equal, and struggling with a lot of like insecurity rooting out of that, and that just came from an expectation that like, oh, once you get married you're gonna have sex all the time. We were dating and having the hardest time like not crossing boundaries, and so just assume like, oh, we'll just want to have sex all the time, but real life kind of hits and it's not exactly like that. And I easily like got into my head about that stuff, and I would just make up a million reasons why that wasn't happening. And that's where the learning to communicate through that stuff has been so important, of like just saying the crazy thing that I've got in my head of an explanation of why things are happening, and letting him speak truth over that, and just walk away from those things, and then recognize that there's areas where I need to build up my security in the right things, and making sure that I'm getting satisfaction from God ultimately, and not seeking that from him, and being a whole person ready to serve him instead of like being needy in that. And then I think a big thing too is just the differences in our families, and like going through interacting with a family that's totally different than my own, and their family dynamics of how they deal with issues. And we've both done a pretty good job, I think, of setting aside that stuff to have our own marriage and our own family where we like make our own choices, but you still have to like carry the drama from your families, or just filter through that of how much that affects you. And I'd say that's probably one of the hardest things that we've walked through.
Talking on the topic of family, how did your family's relationship or your parents' relationship shape your marriage? And maybe not even shape it, what effects did it have on your marriage?
Yeah, I mean, I think we both saw a lot of things that we wanted to make sure that we don't do, especially in Jake's family. You know, his parents had been divorced and remarried and divorced again. So he just saw a lot of how he didn't want to be as a husband and patterns that he didn't want to see in his marriage. And he's done a great job of like tempering that with obedience to God, not just like going the opposite direction for the sake of going the opposite direction, but just really doing it in a way that honors God. And so, you know, we can take the good parts of his parents and learn from them, but also recognizing the areas where they failed and we want to do things differently. And so that's a big thing. And then there's things about my parents that we've taken also that, you know, obviously they shaped me and affected the way that I do communication and different things like that. And more so for the better, but I think the love language thing was a big thing that my parents to this day, I think, still struggle with a little bit. Seeing my dad buy my mom gifts and she hates them and we watch the fight happen every single time. Not even a fight, she just like throws a fit and seems upset for like a week and no one knows why. And it's hard on this side being like, if she just would say she doesn't care about gifts and if he would just understand that it doesn't matter, then it would be fine. But, you know, I guess it's nice being an adult and being able to see that and then go home to your own house and be like, well, it sucks that that's your relationship, but we can have our own and it can be healthy and separate, and that's a really good thing.
A lot of times we talk about like sexual guardrails and physical boundaries. What are some boundaries that you think should be set up that don't just like we're not just talking about sexual boundaries, because we understand that that's something that needs to be taken care of and adjusted, but what are some other boundaries in life, like maybe boundaries with parents or boundaries with what are some of those boundaries that are important for you?
Yeah, I think like a lot of it is just an understanding that we're one unit together, and that that doesn't mean that like we're robots that repeat everything that each other says. Like we both have our own thoughts and opinions and understandings of things, but we ultimately like we'll have discussions so it comes to an agreed upon decision of how to proceed with something and really submitting to each other. I mean, I think of like with work, we do have boundaries of how much time that we dedicate to it and like setting aside time that's just for us, just for family, just for our own health. And I try to submit that, like just being self-aware that I would probably want to work more or be willing to, you know, answer the phone on a busy day when it's supposed to be a family day. And I submit to Jake, and just knowing that he's the one that's going to be more strict on that, holding that boundary, then I let him hold that boundary for me. And like knowing that we probably tend to give our own families more grace, or like our own families more, that I want to spend more time with my family. It's always like I pass the question off to him of like, are we going to hang out with them after church on Sunday? It's totally up to you. If you aren't up for it, then I don't care. I'm always going to go and support my husband in his decision and vice versa. But neither of us abuse that. It's just something that we agree on and like mutually submit in different areas of how to serve each other well. I don't know. I think it applies to a lot of areas. I think we have the same conversations about finances, about the jobs that we'll take, even homes that we look at, or how we spend our money, because they're all connected, that they affect each other, and it's never a victory if I like, you know, twisted his arm into making some purchase, or twisted his arm into letting me go on some trip, or I don't know, anything that he might not have necessarily been for, like, it hurts our relationship in the end, so it's not a victory in any way.
Yeah. You talked about last service, the myth of, not even myth, but more the misconception of when it says a male should be the head of a household, that it's not just like, I can't open my Bible unless he opens it for me kind of thing. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think that there is a big, like, we just hear, like, he should be the spiritual head of the house, especially, like, you become a new Christian, you're like, oh, I just want to find a man that'll lead me spiritually, and that's going to be the most romantic thing and honor God suddenly. And for our relationship specifically, like, it doesn't really look like that. Like, we don't sit down and pray, which doesn't make it a bad thing if you do, if that's, like, your kind of culture of who you are, that you want to sit down and pray together out loud and like have that dedicated time as a couple. That's awesome. And that's just not something that we really practice at home. Like, we're not uncomfortable with prayer. We don't not pray, and we're not like afraid to pray in front of people. Like, we'll do that at any time, but we just kind of see it as like forced. And in our home, it's more that we practice what we've learned at church, that we practice obedience and serving each other. And so Jake doesn't have to sit down and start a Devo with our family in order to lead our household, but it's really in his obedience and the way that he walks out his faith that it leads me by pushing me and by making me want to pursue God more and seeing how God's working in his life and being vulnerable about that. And I think in that too, we both kind of lead each other, that there's like a healthy competition to pursue God more and know God more and grow more in that. And that I'm not, if he's not picking up his Bible to do a Devo today, my faith isn't dependent on that. Mine's independent of his, and I need to be responsible for that myself.
Have there been seasons where you felt your devotional time was fruitful and his was dry? And if so, how do you push him towards God, or vice versa? How has he pushed you towards God in those seasons?
Yeah, definitely. But I just see it as it looks different. Jake does not enjoy reading, so devotional time for him is really, really hard. And, I'm kind of the opposite. So it's just different. And so just having to have the realization that it's much more about actually connecting with God and having a life that resembles Christ and shows obedience is the goal of devotions anyways. And so I see fruit in his life from all of the other ways that he learns about God, pursues him, and obeys him. And, I have found in anything in our marriage that I thought that he should change or do differently, that it always went much better if I prayed like crazy about it and kept my mouth shut and encouraged him and was like an example through my actions, that I, maybe thought that I wished he had more Christian friends or deeper Christian friendships, but instead of like elbowing him and telling him that he needs to do that on a regular basis, instead I prayed for 2 years that he would have real godly relationships in his life. And obviously my elbowing him wouldn't have made those relationships happen. If anything, it's a rare thing to find the people that want to walk with you in your walk and really support you. And so I totally see it as a gift from God, not something that I manufactured because I forced that on him. And so I think it's just a matter of trusting God. Are you trusting your own ability to make the other person better? I think that we do that naturally by serving God and pursuing him, but just through our actions. But a lot of times we can just trust God to do that work in that. But he also encourages me, and I ask him to keep me accountable of Devo time is kind of where I grow. Can you make sure that I do that? And he is willing to do that too.
Okay, we got, I think, 2 more questions. And the first one is, what should dating couples do in their relationship to prepare for marriage?
I think just practice honesty and listening, whether it's small instances where expectations go unmet and just kind of learning how to walk through that of, I was disappointed because I thought this was going to happen and it didn't. And then allowing the other person to respond to that and then coming to an understanding conclusion. I think just practicing that and understanding that doesn't mean that you're a failure or anything like that, but that you can be okay. And then I think just continuing to have a relationship with God and understanding and constantly checking yourself that you're not finding your security or identity or worth in the other person, but it is really in God, and making that a core value that you're going to keep for the rest of your life. That, if that's not right, then that's the thing that you need to stop and make sure that you get that realigned in the right place.
So with talking about kids, how did you know you were ready to have kids? Were you ready to have kids? Were you planning on that? Talk a little bit about that kind of process within marriage.
We thought we were going to have kids in 5 to 10 years. We got married when we were 20. And then after my 21st birthday, I found out I was pregnant. And so we were actually not stoked on that. We were both disappointed. And I, about 2 weeks before that, had prayed that God would challenge us, push us out of our comfort zone, stupid things like that.
He answered your prayer.
And he answered my prayer, and I was really mad about it. we told all our family right away because obviously we like had an apartment that the rent was way too expensive. Like we needed help immediately to get things rearranged, and I was like happy then. And I told my best friends, and a couple weeks later, I remember one of my best friends was like, "So are you excited about it now?" And I was like, "Oh yeah, it's fine now." Like I just needed my minute to be kind of frustrated, and like I liked just the two of us, and it was comfortable, and I in my head was going to have it just like that for 5 to 10 years, and God had different plans. And obviously it's the best thing ever. I'm not going to keep that a secret from our kids that was a surprise that we didn't intend for, but that doesn't mean that I resent them at all. Like it was the best thing to be added to my life. Of like I said, like marriage shows that you're really selfish, and if anything, then having children forces you to stop being so selfish. And we've just enjoyed all that, and the ideas that we had of like gonna be young and married and go do adventures. Now we're gonna be like 40 when our children graduate, and we'll actually have money then and be in like decent health to go do lots of fun adventures. And we really appreciated growing up with not so much money, and so I'd rather that our kids have that same experience with us now than being more financially secure and having them grow up not really knowing what it is to struggle or anything like that. That I think those are good experiences that we had, and we're happy to let them have those. And once we had Jack, we wanted to have our kids 2 years apart, and Jovi's due date was Jack's birthday, and she was born the day after. So it's not like God doesn't want to go with our plans. He just knows what's best, and like that sometimes what's best does line up with what we want, and sometimes it doesn't. And that's been, I think, I don't know, it's been the best thing in our marriage, and just kind of forced us to be really intentional with our marriage from the get-go, because there's people watching us and there's a lot of pressure on it, so we need to be responsible with that.
How do you prioritize, just continuing on that, how do you prioritize kids in marriage? How do you kind of healthily separate the two, where it's not just our marriage is our kids?
Yeah, I think because we had such a short time just being the two of us, I was like, for 2 weeks probably like mourning just the two of us, because I thought it was over, that we were never going to be just the two of us again. And that kind of forced us to make it a really big priority to make sure that we make that a regular thing. And so I think we just tried to have a lot of time. We like have a lot of family around to help with the kids, so we would let people babysit so we could get quality time. But by the time we had Jovi, it just was so hard to feel like we were doing things together, because I was holding a newborn and Jake was holding or like playing with 2-year-old Jack, who's like bouncing off the walls. And it'd be like a week, and I was like, I feel like we just parented separately. Like it felt like a team thing before, and now it's just like it's just us and the kid. And so we just sat down, and it was a really hard few weeks, and decided that regular date nights once a week was going to be what we're going to do for the rest of our life, that we need to make sure that happens, to prioritize that. And so that's just something that we keep, whether it's a fancy night out or going to a movie or finding a day babysitter and going to the beach and surfing together, just making sure that we set aside time to have conversations that we need to have, to connect, to make room to play and laugh together too, and not have everything be really serious. But ultimately we wouldn't have the kids if it weren't for us two being married, and so that's going to be the thing that we come down to, and we know that we're better parents when we are being good husband and wife to each other.
Awesome. I guess, so last thing, just do you have like any encouragement about marriage? Because I think a lot of times it can be, when you hear people talk about it, it can be a scary thing, but what's just like a quick encouragement about being married someday?
Definitely. I mean, marriage is the best thing. I think Christian marriage is the best thing. I think if you aren't a Christian, I don't know why people ever get married. It sounds terrible and so hard, and it's actually a contract. Like, you're going to lose money if you break the contract. It makes no sense to me. But Christian marriage is the best thing. God constantly uses it to teach me and make me better, and the kind of connection that you get to have with a person for the rest of your life, it's there's nothing like it. Like, you can't compare it to anything else. And I would just say that it's so worth it, that we like crave that kind of relationship, I think just innately as humans, but I think we don't know what it is that we're craving until, you know, that's satisfied in marriage, and that's something so cool that it's not just like, well, we waited and then we got married and had sex on our honeymoon and now I've found contentment and fulfillment. But it's something that God like allows you to keep learning and pursuing and growing. And honestly, like, we thought marriage was the greatest thing when we first got married. And then we looked back after the first year and we were like, wow, that was so hard. I can't believe we thought that was great, because it's awesome right now. And literally every single day it gets better and better. That I think like, oh, that was the best sex we've ever had. And then 2 weeks later, like, doesn't even compare to that, that we can be constantly growing, and it can be like, yeah, there's no downside to it. It just gets better and better, and I don't think that there's anything really like that. And so I know I was talking to Lauren Valdez this week, and I think I gave her the worst pep talk about marriage and scared her so bad about it because I made it sound so bad. But I was just being really honest about the really hard things that I think, like Jake was saying, that I wish someone had told me to be prepared for, or just know what I was getting into. And so, maybe it wasn't a pleasant conversation, but it was something that I wish I had heard. And that doesn't take away from how awesome it is. It just is a lot of lessons that I've learned along the way that I was still thinking I was in the best thing ever, that it made me happier than I ever thought I could be. And I was so grateful to be in it. But then it's really cool that it does grow and change, and that you can look back a year later or 10 years later and be like, no, it's way better now. I didn't even know what good was until now.
Yeah, so the whole point of this whole Love, Sex, and Dating series, and why we brought Jake and Nat, is because we want you guys to, kind of like Nat said, she said it's the best thing, and we want you guys to get to experience that and just how great that is. And so we have these talks and these sermons and these series and shivs so that you guys, not just so that you can have the best now, but that you can have the best marriages and the best 5 to 10 years in the future. And so things that we ask you to do now that may seem difficult aren't us just trying to crush your dreams or make your life suck or create a religious cult where everyone is disciplined, but it's in order that you would have the most fulfilling and best marriage. And that's why, like, 2 Christians don't necessarily make a Christian marriage, but 2 people following God's way of doing things has a healthy Christian marriage. And so that's why we give you this advice, and we give you examples like Jake and Nat. And so if you have anyone, or if you're have questions, go to some of the people like Jake and Nat. Go to Chris and Paige, people that you trust and that have good relationships, and ask them how to do it. Because what starts this process out is saying, like, I need to learn. I want to know how to do that, because we can't ever fully be ready for marriage, but we have resources that we can use. And so we just hope that you guys learn from this, because God uses marriage as his primary way of showing us what proper communion and relationship with him looks like. He calls us the bride of Christ, because that is supposed to be this complete and full marriage. And even the greatest marriages we've seen here on this earth don't touch the relationship we have with Christ. And looking to that relationship to be the foundation of yours is what's going to make, I think, marriage strong. So let's pray. And then you guys will be good to go. Dear Lord, thank you for the opportunity to relate to you, God, and thank you for such a great example of marriage. And even though we're broken people and we mess up marriage, God, we know that you perfectly love us and communicate and come after us. And God, may we just turn and look towards you and always chase after you and not the things of this world. May you be the foundation for our marriages so that we may have better marriages, and may everything we do point to you and make us look more like you. We pray these things in your name. Amen.